All right, we're getting back this Sunday to our series in Samuel, and we're on the tail end of the series of our series in Samuel. Been here for a long time in these two books, and in December we're going to start a series in Luke. But as we are finishing up here, we're going to look at chapter 21 of 2 Samuel today, and it's a little bit disconnected if you've been with us for the rest of the series. The last 12 chapters, chapters 9 through 20, really tell like a extended and connected narrative of one story together. Now here at the end of the book, we kind of got like odds and ends. We got some little stories that didn't quite fit in with the flow of the narrative, but they're still important. The author of Samuel still wants us to know these stories. But as we'll see, even the stories today are a bit of a prequel to those other stories. They probably happened before chapters 9 through 20. But it is a gruesome story, right? As with a lot of Samuel, like if you were to make this into a movie, it would be rated R. Like and in this case for like violence and gore. It's bloody and brutal. Kind of fitting for this time of year, but it I'm saying, like, we're going to read some stuff, and you go, I saw that decoration on my street this week, right? Like, it's this kind of stuff. It's pretty brutal. Let's dive in. Verses 1 through 6. Now there was a famine in the days of David for 3 years, year after year, and David sought the face of Yahweh. And Yahweh said, there is blood guilt on Saul and on his house, because he put the Gibeonites to death. So the king called the Gibeonites and spoke to them. Now the Gibeonites were not people of Israel, but of the remnant of the Amorites. Although the people of Israel had sworn to spare them, Saul had sought to strike them down in his zeal for the people of Israel and Judah. And David said to the Gibeonites, what shall I do for you? And how shall I make atonement that you may bless the heritage of Yahweh? The Gibeonites said to him, it is not a matter of silver or gold between us and Saul or his house, neither is it for us to put any man to death in Israel. He said, what do you say I shall do for you? They said to the king, the man who consumed us and planned to destroy us so that we should have no place in all the territory of Israel, let 7 of his sons be given to us so we may hang them before Yahweh at Gibeah of Saul, the chosen of Yahweh. And the king said, I will give them. Okay, so first off, Israel experiences 3 years of famine. 3 years of famine. Now at this time and place, this meant many, many people died. Men, women, children, probably especially children, died because of this famine. They had no means of storing up enough food to last for 3 years. They would have some reserves if they happened to have a weak harvest, but they could not survive for 3 straight years of famine. And famine at this time, again, primarily the result of not getting rain, primarily the result of drought. And so they're experiencing this famine. People are dying all over the place. David inquires of God as to what the reasons for this famine might be. And God told David that it was due to the blood guilt of Saul because he put the Gibeonites to death. So we need to visit the Gibeonite massacre. Okay, so Gibeonites were this group of people that Saul had put to death. He had essentially committed genocide. He went through and killed them. They're living among the Israelites, and he sought to, out of his desire, to exterminate foreigners, right? He's like, we got to get these foreigners out from among our people. We don't like seeing them around. He starts killing them off, right? And they're hiding and going on the run and all that kind of thing, but he's killing off as many as he can find. He can find a Gibeonite, he kills him. And he said he did this out of a zeal for the people of Israel and Judah. And in reality, this is just him going like, I don't like these foreigners. I don't want these non-Israelites living among us. He starts killing them off. But the Gibeonites are there in the first place because they created a treaty with Joshua way back in Joshua chapter 9. So in Joshua chapter 9, this is after Joshua, who's, remember, the leader after Moses, and he's the one that leads the Israelites into the promised land. And as they go in, he is just destroying everybody, right? He has been told by God to wipe out all the people that they come encounter in the land of Canaan, that God is giving them the land there to go and wipe them out. So he's going to war and doing all these things. He's taken down Jericho. He's taken down a city, Ai, that's Ai. He takes down that city. He's taking down these two juggernaut cities, right? Jericho, you remember this, the story of the Battle of Jericho, right? From Sunday school, you probably had to march in a circle, and you were probably giving kazoos or something you had to blow, and and he knocked down the block building. You all did that, right? Yeah. So they took down Jericho, but Jericho was considered like undefeatable. They took down Jericho, they took down this other major city. So now they're looking scary, right? Joshua and the Israelites, they're looking like they can do some serious damage. They're looking like a major threat. The Gibeonites, they hear about this and they get a plan together. They go, okay, so I've been told this new group that's come into the land and has taken down Jericho, and they sent somebody, got intelligence. That guy came back and said, hey, they've been told to wipe out anybody. They've been told to wipe out any people in the land of Canaan. Their God is giving them this land. They've been told to wipe out any of the people that live in this land. And they went, well, we live in this land. Yeah, we got to come up with a plan. So their plan was, they made themselves look, they put on worn out clothes and got themselves all dusty, like they'd been traveling for a long time. They got they made it look like you've been on a road trip for a long time, and you stop at the gas station, you go in that gas station bathroom, and you wash your hands, you look up in the mirror, and you go, oh, I've been on the road too long, right? That's what they're like, okay, listen, no haircuts. We're not doing haircuts. Don't bathe. Everybody, we got to look real dusty and worn out. So they show up they greet the Israelites, and they put on this performance as though we've been traveling for days and days. We've been traveling for weeks. We're not from around here. And Joshua and the Israelites, they buy it. They believed them. And let's go to Joshua chapter 9, verse 15. At the end of 3 days, after they had made a covenant with them, they heard that they were neighbors and that they lived among them. And the people of Israel set out and reached their cities on the third day. Now their cities were Gibeon, Cherepha, Beeroth, and Kiriath Jearim. But the people of Israel did not attack them because the leaders of the congregation had sworn to them by Yahweh, the God of Israel. Then all the congregation murmured against the leaders, but all the leaders said to the congregation, we have sworn to them by Yahweh, the God of Israel, and now we may not touch them. This we will do to them. Let them live, lest wrath be upon us, because of the oath that we swore to them. And the leaders said to them, let them live. So they became cutters of wood and drawers of water for all the congregation, just as the leaders had said to them. So they find out, they're actually from real close by. We can get to their cities in 3 days' time. They tricked us. But they already swore this treaty. They swore an oath by the God of Israel, by Yahweh. They swore this oath that they would not harm them. So they said, we cannot harm them. We have to let them live and let them live among us. They got jobs as being woodcutters and water carriers, right? Kind of menial jobs, but they were allowed to live among them. But even 400 years later, when Saul comes into power and he becomes the king, there's still this animosity. They've never truly integrated. They're still separate. The Gibeonites are known as being different from the Israelites, and the Israelites don't like them, and so Saul knows, I can gain some popularity by just wiping these guys out. I can go and commit genocide and kill these people, and people will like it, and Saul himself presumably will like it. He didn't like the Gibeonites either. And so he does this. He violates that treaty that's been 400 years old. Right? Any of the people that made it aren't alive anymore, and he kills them. And as a result, God tells David that now they're experiencing famine because of that murder, because of that defilement of the land, that as a result they're experiencing this famine. So then David goes to the Gibeonites and says, what do you want me to do for you? And they go, we don't want money. We don't want you to kill anybody, and we don't really want just any old Israelite to die. We want 7 of Saul's sons. He's the one who did it. They carry his blood. His blood is what will pay for this. So he asks for 7 of them, and David just agrees. He goes, very well. He's going to do it. He's going to let them have 7 of Saul's sons. Which seems shocking, right? It seems shocking to us, but we got to recognize the gravity of this situation, right? How horrible all of this is. First, you have the Gibeonite massacre, which is horrible. He just killing people outright in the streets, hunting them down. I mean, it points to so many awful incidents in history that we can think of where genocide has been committed, and that's what's going on here. He's just committing genocide. All these Gibeonites are dying. Then they experience 3 years of famine in which indiscriminately everybody is dying because there's not enough food to go around. Women and children are dying of starvation. And I know right now a lot of you are probably thinking like, you know what? Yeah, this is why I don't like the Old Testament. This is right here. This is why. Will you stop teaching out of the Old Testament? Like, can we just let's start Luke early? Huh? What do you think? Right? I know that's what a lot of people think, is this is uncomfortable. Right? It's a brutal, like that, just the idea of there's starvation, there's genocide, there's now going to be executions of 7 men just like given over, like, yep, go kill these guys. And it's brutal. It's brutal justice. It's barbarous justice. But it is justice. And all of this kind of goes back to the Old Covenant, because under the Old Covenant, Yahweh told the people of Israel, like, I will come and live among you, but if I come and live among you, then this place where we dwell together is holy ground, and you cannot defile this ground. And specifically, there are 3 ways in the Old Testament that God tells the Israelites they can defile the land. Through idolatry, right? Worshiping idols, worshiping these foreign gods that the Canaanites had worshipped, sexual immorality, and murder. Murder was the 3rd one, and that's what's going on here. People have been murdered unjustly. This is not murder. This is not killing in war. This is outright murder. Numbers chapter 35, verses 30 through 34 says, if anyone kills a person, the murderer shall be put to death on the evidence of witnesses, but no person shall be put to death on the testimony of one witness. Moreover, you shall accept no ransom for the life of a murderer who is guilty of death, but he shall be put to death. And you shall accept no ransom for him who has fled to his city of refuge, that he may return to dwell in the land before the death of the high priest. You shall not pollute the land in which you live, for blood pollutes the land, and no atonement can be made for the land for the blood that is shed in it, except by the blood of the one who shed it. You shall not defile the land in which you live, in the midst of which I dwell, for I, Yahweh, dwell in the midst of the people of Israel. So we see that the punishment for this sin is brutal, but the sin itself is brutal as well, right? Saul's sin was gruesome. The payment is also gruesome. And it all ultimately points us to the cross of Jesus, right? If you think about the fact that Jesus suffered and died on the cross, right? Suffered a brutal, gruesome death on the cross for our sin. Why? Because it matches. Our sin is brutal and gruesome. Our rebellion has created this world in which there is brokenness, in which there is brutality and death and suffering. It's all the result of our sin, our rebellion against our Creator. It's not part of God's design. It was never part of His design from the beginning that any of these things should happen. But because we decided that we know better than God, and that we would make a better God than God, we rebelled against Him, and thus sin entered the world, and these kind of things entered the world. And as a result, the consequences are also gruesome. But it isn't the final state of things. When Jesus returns, all things will be made good again. We'll look next here at verses 7 through 14. But the king spared Mephibosheth, the son of Saul's son Jonathan, because the oath of Yahweh that was between them, between David and Jonathan, the son of Saul. The king took the 2 sons of Rizpah, the daughter of Aiah, whom she bore to Saul, Armoni and Mephibosheth, and the 5 sons of Merab, the daughter of Saul, whom she bore to Adriel, the son of Barzillai, the Meholathite, and he gave them into the hands of the Gibeonites, and they hanged them on the mountain before Yahweh, and the 7 of them perished together, for they were put to death in the first days of the harvest, at the beginning of the barley harvest. Then Rizpah, the daughter of Aiah, took sackcloth and spread it for herself on the rock from the beginning of the harvest until the rain fell upon them from the heavens. She did not allow the birds of the air to come upon them by day, or the beasts of the field by night. When David was told what Rizpah, the daughter of Aiah, the concubine of Saul, had done, David went and took the bones of Saul and the bones of his son Jonathan from the men of Jabesh Gilead, who had stolen them from the public square of Bethshan, where the Philistines had hanged them on the day the Philistines killed Saul on Gilboa. And he brought up from there the bones of Saul and the bones of his son Jonathan, and they gathered the bones of those who were hanged, and they buried the bones of Saul and his son Jonathan in the land of Benjamin and Zelah, in the tomb of Kish, his father. And they did all that the king commanded, and after that God responded to the plea for the land. So these 7 men are executed, they're hung on the mountain, and they're left there. They're left there exposed to the elements as a means of penance, as a means of saying, like, until the rain comes, they're going to hang there. Brutal, morbid, dark, terrible. And Rizpah, the mother of some of the men who were executed, she decides to go camp out. She goes and camps out on the mountain next to the body. She spreads out her bedding or sackcloth there for her to lay on. And she guards the bodies from the birds and from the predators that would go, the scavengers that would come at night to try to devour them. And she just stays there the whole time. She camps out the whole time. It's heartbreaking to imagine. And it's heartbreaking for David. David sees her doing this. He sees her guarding these bodies. You can imagine him at a distance, like someone told him, hey, Rizpah is out there. She's out there on the mountain, like guarding the bodies. And David goes to see for himself, and he probably sees her, chasing the birds. Like, get out of here. Get out. Leave them alone. Chasing them away. He's probably got a stick to fend off raccoons and whatever other things would come to scavenge from the bodies at night. Now hardly sleeping. But honoring these men, right? Honoring these men and showing love and honor to these men, a light in the darkness, right? She's a light in the darkness in this situation of just showing the care and heart and love that she has for these men in spite of all that has gone on. That had nothing to do with her, right? She's just one of Saul's concubines. She's not even elevated to the status of wife, and yet she is doing what she can to bring light to this dark situation. Now this, I mentioned that this is thought by many Bible scholars to be a prequel, and we think that largely because of one incident that we already saw, because there's an incident in 2 Samuel chapter 16, where if you remember when David is fleeing from Absalom, his son, who has made a coup against him to take the throne, and he's leaving Jerusalem, there's this man, Shimei, who comes upon him on the road, and he's up on a hillside looking down on David and his men as they're leaving, and he starts throwing rocks and things at them and also hurling insults at them. And he's got one particular refrain that he keeps going back to. If we look at just verses 6, 7, and 8 of chapter 16, it says, Shimei said as he cursed, get out, you man of blood, you worthless man. Yahweh has avenged on you all the blood of the house of Saul, in whose place you have reigned, and Yahweh has given the kingdom into the hand of your son Absalom. See, your evil is on you, for you are a man of blood. When we read this, I kind of noted that David didn't kill Saul, and didn't really even kill any of his family. He had kind of spared them. Right, and specifically, we saw the incident where he showed kindness to Mephibosheth, Jonathan's son, because of the oath that he and Jonathan had made. Remember, they were best friends. They were almost like brothers together, and he had made this covenant with them. So we see even in this incident, he spares Jonathan's son Mephibosheth. There's another Mephibosheth who does get executed. If you got confused there, Mephibosheth comes up again. It's just Mephibosheth was apparently a common name at the time, right? It's hard to imagine with that kind of name. I'm Mephibosheth. I'm Mephibosheth B, in class. That kind of thing. But he had spared him, but he gave over these other 7 men from the house of Saul to the Gibeonites. It's the first time we really see David specifically take any action against any members of the house of Saul. And here in this passage, Shimei is saying, you man of blood, you're being avenged for the blood of the house of Saul. He's talking about this incident, right? Most likely he's talking about this incident where David had given these men over to the Gibeonites. But David, seeing Rizpah and her love poured out in grief for her sons and protecting these bodies, he is reminded that he can actually do something good here as well. He goes down to Jabesh Gilead, gets the bones of Saul and Jonathan, who that's where they had been taken after the battle with the Philistines in which they died, and he brings their bones back home, right? They're not in their homeland. He brings them back home, buries them in the tomb of Saul's father, takes the bones of the men who died on the mountain, and he buries them properly as well. He does what he can. Sparked by Rizpah, he does the right thing. And in response, God responds to the plea for the land and gives them rain. We're going to look at one last passage here, verses 15 through 22. This is a separate incident from that one. There was war again between the Philistines and Israel, and David went down together with his servants, and they fought against the Philistines. And David grew weary. And Ishbi-Benob, one of the descendants of the giants, whose spear weighed 300 shekels of bronze, and who was armed with a new sword, thought to kill David. But Abishai, the son of Zeruiah, came to his aid and attacked the Philistine and killed him. Then David's men swore to him, "You shall no longer go out with us to battle, lest you quench the lamp of Israel." After this, there was again war with the Philistines at Gob, and Sibbecai the Hushathite struck down Saph, who was one of the descendants of the giants, and there was again war with the Philistines at Gob, and Elihan, the son of Jair-Oregim, the Bethlehemite, struck down Goliath the Gittite, the shaft of whose spear was like a weaver's beam. And there was again war at Gath, and there was a man of great stature who had 6 fingers on each hand and 6 toes on each foot, 24 in number, and he also was descended from the giants. And when he taunted Israel, Jonathan, the son of Shimei, David's brother, struck him down. These 4 were descended from the giants in Gath, and they fell by the hand of David and by the hand of his servants. So this passage kind of summarizes the death of 4 giants, right? 4 giants like Goliath, right? We know that story. If you think of King David, you think of David and Goliath, right? That's the premier story. And we know that he had killed Goliath, but there are other giants, right, that lived among the Philistines. And it says specifically these 4. Ishbi-Benob was killed by Abishai, David's nephew. Saph was killed by Sibbecai the Hushathite. Goliath too was killed by Elihan, the son of Jair-Oregim. The 6-fingered man was killed by Inigo Montoya, I think. No, he's killed by Jonathan, also David's nephew. Right, so there's these other giants. There's 4 other giants that were warriors with the Philistines. Goliath wasn't the only one. Right, and we see these 4 accounts of here are the guys, here are the giant killers. Right, these are the 4 guys who were able to kill the giants. And in general, one of the overarching themes we can see through both 1st and 2nd Samuel is a distinction between Saul as king and David as king. Right, and one of the things we see even in this passage is Saul not keeping his covenants and his treaties and his oaths, and David keeping his. Right, even David here keeping the oath that he made to Jonathan by protecting Mephibosheth from being one of the 7 men who would go to death by the hand of the Gibeonites, but also militarily Saul being unable to deal with the Philistines and David being able to handle them. Right? Saul is not able to handle them. David is able to handle them, this Philistine threat. And so we see that difference here, but the way it happens is different. And especially this highlighting of how these 4 other giants die, right after Goliath, how these 4 other giants die shows us some of that. Because we notice in this passage, it tells us David grew weary. Right? The very first giant that he mentioned in this passage, David is fighting him first, Ishbi. David is fighting him, And David gets cornered. He gets worn out. He's about to get killed by this giant. He's about to get killed by this giant man. And Abishai, his nephew, comes to his rescue and kills him. David doesn't do it. David is not capable of being a one-man army. He cannot do it all by himself. That is often how we see David because of the story of David and Goliath. Right? Because of the story of David and Goliath, we think of David as he's the one who just by himself, with God by his side and his sling, he can take down the giants, and I'm going to be just like David. All I need is me and God, and I can take on the world. But that's not the story of David at all. Even as a military man, that's not his story. Here we see David can't do it. David grew weary. He needs somebody else to come in and take out this giant. And then he's not even involved in the other three. Why? Because they tell him, we actually need to not have you come to battle with us at all. That was too close, and you are too valuable to us as a leader that even as great a warrior as you are, we need you to stay around, because if you died, it'd be like the very light of Israel being quenched out. And so he is no longer allowed to go to war. He becomes the leader of the army, the tactical leader and trainer, and he ends up training an army full of men who are capable of killing giants. Right? He's not the guy who goes like, you can very easily see someone in his position being like, guys, I know we're going to war with the Philistines again. Notice they've got a giant with them. Remember, he's mine. I'm the giant killer. Remember Goliath? That was my rookie season. I took out Goliath, and I can take out this one. I'm the giant specialist. You let me get him. You guys deal with all the normal-sized people. But no, he doesn't. He trains and leads an army of giant killers. And this should be encouragement to us that we are not meant to face the giants alone. Right? The giants we face in our life, the battles we face in our life, we're not meant to face them alone. We need one another. Right? David needed Abishai in that moment to come and take him out. He could not face the giant alone. We cannot face our battles alone. We're not meant to. We're meant to have an army of giant killers around us. The bravest, strongest warriors in the Old Testament, the biggest heroes of the Old Testament, needed other people around them to help them. Even with God, God designed us. Yes, God has our back. Yes, He is our ultimate protector, all of that. But He utilizes our brothers and sisters in Christ to come alongside of us. It's really never just you and God. He had designed you to live in a community and to have people around you that can help you fight these battles. So the question that you need to ask yourself is, who are your giant killers? Right? Who are those who can come around you and help you take out the giants that you face in your life? I'll wrap up with this 3 takeaways for today's message. Number 1, recognize the brutality of sin and retribution is antithetical to God's design. It is never part of His plan from the beginning. It's not part of His creation's intent. He created a world to be perfect and without suffering and pain and ugliness, but our sin introduced it. It's important as we navigate a world in which we do encounter these things to recognize what God's original design was and what He is taking us back to. Because Scripture and history all tie together to show us this picture of God created a perfect world, but mankind broke it when they rebelled against Him, and sin entered the world. And so then now, by nature and choice, we are sinners who continually reject our Creator and create this world that is broken and full of sin and pain. But that Jesus chose to come and step into that mess. He chose to come and be a part of it, to face it with us, and to ultimately suffer and die a gruesome, brutal death on the cross to pay for our sins, that we might have a relationship with Him. And that ultimately in the end that He will return and make all things new again, make things good again like they were at the beginning. But the suffering we see is not part of God's original design. Number 2, in the midst of that darkness in which we live, do what you can to bring light. We are meant to bring light, to bring hope, to bring love to this world that is suffering as a result of sin. And then lastly, don't fight your battles alone, right? Bring people around you who can encourage you and help you when you are facing giants. I'm going to pray here in just a minute, and then we're going to take communion together in remembrance of Jesus' broken body and shed blood. After that, we will sing a closing song, and then there'll be a prayer team available up here, right over here after the service. If you'd like prayer for anything, they would love to pray for you. Would you bow with me now? Heavenly Father, we thank you for this morning. We thank you for your word that speaks into the world that we see, God. This is a brutal passage full of suffering and brutality and ugliness, God, but it is not foreign to us. It is not foreign to us. We see this kind of suffering and ugliness every day in this world that has rebelled against you, God. And we know that you are the hope for this broken world. You are where we can find peace, where we can find hope, where we can find joy, where we can find love. And God, I pray that you would encourage us to take that hope that we have found in you to a world that is so desperately in need of it. And that we would not forget that we need one another as we seek to do that. Pray these things in Jesus' blessed name. Amen.